Hi, I'm actor Ian Champion, and welcome to History of Horror Cinema, my podcast series devoted to the good, bad, and the ugly of horror movie history. Please don't forget to like what you hear and hit subscribe. I have such sights to show you. The Hands of Orlac, 1924. In 1924, director Robert Wiener and actor Conrad Veidt re-teamed from their success in The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari for this Austrian horror film. It's an atmospheric, enjoyable tale based on the novel Les Mains d'Orlac by Maurice Renard that mixes expressionist acting and set designs with naturalistic attitudes and locations. Veidt plays Paul Orlac, a celebrated French concert pianist who almost dies in a terrible railway crash. His wife, Yvonne, an emotive, suffering Alexandra Serena, is desperate to save his beautiful, tender hands, and begs a surgeon to save them. He does so, but by transplanting those of an executed murderer, Vasseur. The knowledge of this sends Orlac into a constant waking nightmare of believing his new hands are possessed with homicidal tendencies. Veidt is well cast as Orlac, channeling his physicalization skills convincingly to portray the terrifying separation he feels from his murderous hands, and with those searing eyes that this time engender sympathy rather than fear, his inner pain radiating poignantly through them. He pleads to have the surgeon undo his work, but is told that only the head and heart rule a person's hands. Mysteriously, he comes across Vasseur's X-engraved murder knife and tries to hide it in his piano, knowing that the incriminating fingerprints upon it are now his. Bold expressionism dramatically conveys Orlac's mounting madness, such as when an enormous fist descends on him across the bedroom to awaken him in terror. The set design for the film is mostly naturalistic, but in his home there's an effectively creepy sparseness. Only the bed and a foreground pool of light are picked out in that barren room. The hallway, too, is notable only for a large highlighted vase. These elements, coupled with the eldritch energy taking over Orlac, isolate his state and unease, compounding his innermost fear that Vasseur will take him over again. While Orlac struggles with his secret, Yvonne tries to keep creditors at bay. She appeals to Paul's father, a cruel remote man whose challenged refusal to help causes him to spit, "Yes, I want to. I hate him." When Orlac goes himself, to his horror he finds his father stabbed to death, and somehow by the found weapon. To make matters worse, Orlac is now approached by a villainous figure with a permanent sneer who claims to be Vasseur and blackmails him for 1,000,000 francs. Or he will tell the police it was Orlac who murdered his father. Such is the increasingly fractured mind of Orlac that Vasseur has him believing that the surgeon gave this baddie a transplant as well, of a new head onto Vasseur's body. With his doting wife at his side, to the police at the elder Orlac's murder scene, Orlac confesses what he knows of the crime, and manages to suspend the cops' incredulity in turn enough to convince them to stake out the money drop. When they apprehend the blackmailer, it turns out, Scooby-Doo style, that he is Nearer, a known con artist who had pretended to be Vasseur, making wax impressions of the executed man's fingerprints to finger Orlac. The pianist's manipulative maid, who was also in on the plot, won't escape justice either. On finding that Nearer had also framed Vasseur, meaning he was executed in innocence, Orlac studies his hands in wonder. Now he can safely touch his wife, knowing that the evil, self-induced spell over him is broken. The Hands of Orlac can be counted as the first of the hands with a will of their own horror plot device that was subsequently remade as Mad Love with Peter Lorre, The Beast with 5 Fingers, and least successfully inspired the poorly conceived The Hand by Oliver Stone, starring Michael Caine. Intriguingly, the film almost became banned on its release when German authorities considered a request for suppression over concerns that it might reveal too much about fingerprint techniques and other police forensic methods. Fortunately, the submission didn't get far, presumably because it was realized that no one can create wax prints, as well as the unlikeliness that criminals would take influence from a greatly enjoyable, far-fetched horror movie for their future escapades. The Magician, 1926. Paul the Golem Wegener accepted an invitation from Hollywood in 1926 to play the title character in director Rex Ingram's Parisian occult thriller based on the Somerset Maugham novel. His broad Asiatic features, imposing physique and forbidding stare were now put to work for American audiences. "He looks as if he had stepped out of a melodrama," scoffs the male love interest Arthur Burden, Ivan Petrovich, to his fiancée Margaret, played by Alice Terry. Fate brought them together when Margaret, a sculptor, had her spine damaged by her 18-foot fawn sculpture toppling onto her, and Burden, a surgeon, operates on her with great success. They are not aware that Margaret is being studied covetously during her operation by Oliver Haddo, Wegener, a sinister magician and student of the black arts of witchcraft. He visits Margaret and shows off his terrifying hypnotic ability by bringing her sculpture to life as part of a hellish Orgy of the Damned series of imagery before her. Margaret fits the shopping list for Haddo's main ingredients for his creation of life experiment. The heart blood of a maiden of fair skin, golden hair, eyes that are blue or grey is essential. Her suitability is such that he steals her away from Burden on their wedding morning and marries her himself, but not before demonstrating to Burden, Margaret, and her uncle, guardian, Dr. Pourhaut, that his magical power extends to even vaporizing a deadly snake bite. Burden and Pourhaut track down his fiancée and her evil husband to Monte Carlo, where Margaret tearfully begs for Burden's forgiveness. He assures her he knows it is not her fault that such a wicked hypnotist had her under his spell, but that Haddo intends to kill me in an experiment of magic. They leave the Riviera, and after a sanitarium stay, Margaret's memory of the magician is but a bad dream, until he kidnaps her and takes her to his intimidating tower in the village of La Tourette. Burden and Pourhaut race to the rescue once more, as Haddo conducts formulas in his lab while our heroine is strapped to his table. Lightning flashes Frankenstein style in the urgent climax as Burden and Haddo grapple, with Pourhaut fending off his henchmen until Haddo falls into his own furnace and the spell over Margaret is finally broken. As the virtuous flee the lair, the tower's mounting occult energy causes it to explode. Although the magician was made outside Germany, in the casting of Wegener as the glowering figure of supernatural influence, it is inspired by Expressionist themes, as is the devilish frolicking in the Nightmare Fawn sequence, reminiscent of Haxan. The international exchange program of connections would go further, as one of Ingram's assistants was a young British filmmaker, Michael Powell, who would famously go on to create A Matter of Life and Death and The Red Shoes, amongst other classics back home in England.